Okay, today we're going to be painting this orc knob with Waaagh banner. Let's get into it. Starting as we always do with the orcs, straight into the flesh. Auric flesh for a base over this already applied zenithal priming. So just making sure to get every single bit of that flesh, the armpits, the elbows, everywhere underneath, all of those little details that the orcs like to carry around with them. You don't have to be too careful here, you can make a bit of a mess because we're all going to tidy up all those parts over the top anyway, but obviously we don't want to get too messy. Using Garagak Sewer now, we're going to go over all of the leather parts that aren't straps. So I'm looking for the pants, I'm looking for the belt on the gun, but the straps to go over his shoulders, we're going to paint that differently a little bit later. So here, just getting the strap on the gun, make sure not to get onto the actual gun itself. Not that it would make much of a difference, going to coat that in lead belcher in a little bit anyway. And just finishing off camera here with some of those final little bits of leather. Okay, lead belcher, lots and lots of lead belcher. We're going to go in over everything that could be metallic. Just give it a nice base coat of this. We need to be a little bit careful around those areas that we've already painted with the Garagax sewer for the leather and the Auroch flesh. But for this, a nice liberal coating. Make sure you thin those paints first and just get into all the little bits and pieces. Just getting into the nooks and crannies of his fist here before we get onto the Waaagh banner itself. We're going to give it a full coat of lead belcher, but we're going to recover a lot of this later to give it a nice effect. But this lead belcher is going to help us really sell that metallic feel and really bring up some brightness there, because we want to draw attention to this, obviously, on the battlefield. Quick touch of Dark Reaper. Just going to do his hair here. I'm going to highlight this later, but we don't want anything too exciting for the hair because we're going to draw attention away from the face. So we're going to give it a fairly desaturated bluish grey. Okay, a liberal wash of Beeltan green for the whole flesh area, just to get into those recesses, start adding some shape and some shadow into those big orc muscles. Okay, now one of my favourite mixes, we're using Troll Slayer Orange and Retributor Armour, and we're going into some of the details on the weapon, but we've also painted the top part of the banner almost entirely in this mix. It's got a copperish feel without being too golden, so it's got a bit more wear, feels a bit more worn and cheap and homemade, as the Orc weapons and equipment tend to be. Now I'm just using some Steel Legion drab here. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to do all the straps for his harness and things in a different leathery colour, just to draw some attention to them on his body. As you can see there, unfortunately I've lost quite a bit of footage for this. We went in with some Black Legion contrast paint for the black on his bodysuit. It also did his boots in the Black Legion contrast. Some quick touches with Korax white. I want to draw some attention to this little panel, so I'm going to do the whole thing in white, mostly because I want the bones to be a nice clean white colour, and I'm also going to quickly touch into his eyeballs. Now back with some Orc flesh. I'm going to be dry brushing this with a very small dry brush and very carefully over his flesh, just to bring back some of those details, take away the shine from that wash and bring back some highlights, just starting building them up slowly, and that way we're going to get some nice shape and definition into his flesh, where a lot of the intention for Orcs is. Then I'm going to start mixing in some Flash Gits yellow, just a tiny bit at a time, and giving it quick dry brushes, just building it up layer by layer and getting smaller and smaller in the area that I'm dry brushing, so that we really get a nice even build up in highlights. Now I've got some Stormhost silver, and I'm sort of dry brushing quite generously onto that area that we painted with that Troll Slayer orange and Retributor gold mix. I'm taking away a lot of the saturation of that colour because I want it to look quite worn, but I do still want that coppery feel underneath. Some small details with some small Mephiston red. We're going into the back panels, the back of this small panel that's hanging off the Waaagh banner, but I'm also going to do some of his wiring and things. Not a big fan of hazard tape type piping. I just feel like it always ends up looking a little bit clumsy, and generally the effort versus reward tends to be a little bit skewed towards effort. So nice bright red dangerous cables I feel look a little bit better. I tend to use the hazard for hoses really when it's weapons that use a fuel. I feel like that's a little bit more authentic. Okay, so some titanium white ink. I'm going to use this for these tiny little bolts on the back of the Waaagh banner, which I imagine is electrified for some crazy reason. I'm also going to get into his teeth. I think I gave his eyes another coat here as well because I just wanted to do that a little bit brighter. And any other tiny details that I want to pick out with brighter colours later. Now I'm using some Shabti bone on these bandages and wraps on the Waaagh banner, and I also do his teeth in this as well, just to bring them a little bit of slight staining, because we don't want those bright white pearly teeth on orcs. Now I'm using Agrax Earthshade on the areas we painted with that Troll Slayer Orange and Retributor Armour area, but I'm going to put it in very heavily into the recesses, because after this we're going to add in some colour to make it a little bit more corroded. Again, I went with that sort of, this banner is electrified field, so that electricity is going to obviously cause some corrosion. But the Agrax Earthshade just all over those areas, but concentrating on keeping it nice and heavy in the recesses. Now, good old Nuln Oil all over everything that's metallic. Good heavy coat. Absolutely wash it in this stuff. Everyone loves it. Added some highlights to his hair with Administratum Grey. Nothing too stressful, just picking out some of those higher points and a few of those strands to give a little bit of life. Now I wanted a little bit more focus on his face, so I went with some pure Flash Gits yellow and very carefully, very gently put in some touches of pure yellow in some of the very high points of his face. Cheekbones, eyebrows, upper lip, and a little bit onto his fingers there, and a little bit on his shoulders. Just those topmost parts where the light's really going to hit. Okay, something that really brings this together, a mix of cerulean blue oil from Winsor & Newton and some mineral oil. About even part, because I want a fairly thin wash. And I'm just building this up into those recesses where we put the Agrax Earthshade, and that's going to really help with this corrosion feel. I've put it around all those edges, in the eyeballs and around the teeth. I'm just going to let that sit. It can be quite heavy, because with the mineral oil we can come back and we can wipe this off for hours after this, because it takes such a long time to dry. And we've got a lot of control over where we get this effect. Now I'm using some Necron compound on a dry brush just to dot in some wear and tear, take away a little bit of the shine from the Nuln Oil and the other washes that we put on there, and bring those metals back down to earth a little bit. onto the base, we're going simple but effective. We've got some leftover pieces of torn up cork that I had, so I'm just going to super glue those to the base. I'll leave a little gap in the middle, but it doesn't really matter because the base of the model itself is going to cover that. So I'm just arranging them nicely on the base. Lots of little super glue to make sure that they don't wander off anywhere. Now the model's coming in, super glue it to the top. I'm going to hold it for a little while, make sure that it's completely stable. We really want that glue to start drying before, be fully dried really before we go any further. Dabbing on some Eshin Grey. It's a layer paint, so it's fairly thin, so we want to be quite generous with this, but we just want to cover the whole base in this, make sure we get into all those nooks and crannies. It can be a little bit difficult to get to sometimes, so I've got a fairly old brush here that I don't mind sort of stabbing a little bit with. Just make sure we get everything covered in that. Then a dry brush of Mechanicus Standard Grey, just to give it a little bit of volume, just to get those edges. And then finally, a fairly delicate but top down dry brushing of Administratum Grey. We just want to get those top parts where the light's going to hit and the edges where things are going to be a little bit more freshly crumbled and have a little less dirt to them, just to give this base a little bit of life. We're keeping it simple, but there's a lot of impact to this. Now just doing the edge in Black Legion to clean it all up and really finish that model off. And there he is, pure Green Fury, ready to dominate his enemies and rally the troops on any tabletop. Thanks for watching, give us a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.